Second watch. All right. Welcome back to the second watch, everyone. Gary's having some technical issues that we're working out. So right now it's the second watch with Matt and Alex.
What's up?
Alex, thank you so much for coming on to the show tonight. We were talking a little bit before the stream when Gary and I were putting this together a year ago. You were one of the top guys on the list that we want to get on. I'm sure Gary will talk a little bit more once he gets his stuff figured out, but Arbiter of Worlds was a revelation for both of us. We really,
awesome.
yeah, we really love your work, love the way you think, and we wanted to get you on here and talk to you about your approach to design, your approach to games in particular, and how you run your table and that sort of thing. So we really appreciate you taking the time tonight on this Friday night, late Friday night, to talk with us. However, before we get into the nuts and bolts of you and your work, I did have a promise I need to fulfill. A good friend of the channel's, Death Angel Shadow. He does a number of live streams with some sci-fi guys, including a Babylon 5 retrospective show.
Awesome.
And just the other day, they announced they have a special guest. And that is, let me share my screen here. And that is Peter Jurassic, the guy who played Londo.
Wow.
Yeah. He's like one of my favorite characters from the show. Just phenomenal, just a phenomenal actor. And so yeah, they're going to be talking to him January 28th, 8 p.m. I guess 3 or 4 different YouTube channels. You got Sci-Fi for Me, QT Cast, and then the Tennessee Tabletop Tavern. That's our friend Death Angel Shadow's channel. So I hope you guys go check that out, especially if you're a sci-fi fan and a Babylon 5 fan. That's been like a, I don't know, cult classic, and a buddy of mine introduced me to that show some years ago, and I've been hooked ever since. So anyway, congratulations, Death Angel. That's awesome. So Gary,
hello.
It's working. All right.
Victory. Thank you.
All right, we got a quick super chat. Mercurius, thank you very much. One Aussie. All right, Gary, I'm glad things are working.
Yeah, sorry about that. Today was Apple update day, and the only reason people buy Apple computers is because they don't know how to get into computers and make them work. And Apple does everything. I'm completely illiterate. So as soon as there's an update, I have 3 days of everything going wrong. So sorry about that.
But you're here now.
I am here now. Thanks for being here. I've really been looking forward to this. I've had a lot of fun reading through Acts 2 and Ascendant and Arbiter of Worlds. I heard Matt saying that was a really big thing for both of us. Having that, and I'm just curious. I had heard you say in other interviews that you've played story games before and you did the story paths. Did you have a breaking moment? Like, what happened? You were now like the de facto leader of the opposite side of that. Like, was there a moment when you saw it change? What happened?
Oh gosh. No, it was not a clear moment for me. It was, I was active on Usenet in the 1990s and the early 2000s when, simulationism, narrativism, gamism were being discussed. RPG Pundit was pretty active in the late aughts, early teens, talking on those topics. And I suppose where I began to get annoyed was that there began to be a holier than thou attitude coming out of narrative game design. That in some way they had figured out the true secret sauce of tabletop RPGs, and it was telling stories. And those of us who were doing simulation games there was something wrong with us. And I remember Ron Edwards actually wrote an essay calling us all brain damaged. Over on the Forge, like, they said simulationism was not even a reasonable play style, and those who were engaged in it were brain damaged, etc. And that bugged me a lot, because I went from thinking like, yeah, these are just sort of different attitudes towards how one could play an RPG, to all of a sudden, I'm being called brain damage. So I did like this deep dive into Forge theory, because I really wanted to understand like what would lead someone to think that a fellow gamer was brain damaged because they didn't like the sort of games he played. And when I actually really studied the theory, the Forge theory, I came to the conclusion that it was fundamentally wrong. The theory had gone awry, for two reasons. So one, they felt that a game was only coherent, that's their word, coherent, if it picked simulation, narrative, or game as its focus. And that to the extent that a game had sort of overlapping approaches, that was an incoherent game that led to bad gameplay. And I disagreed with that. I feel like a good simulation gives you the world within which you can play a great game, from which an amazing story emerges. So I viewed the maximum coherency coming from the perfection of the three. And then the other was that they took the point of view that what they called stance made no difference. And in Forge theory, stance is the level at which you're interacting with the game. So there's pawn stance when you're just playing a war game. So you have no real care or consideration for the character. It's just a pawn to you that you use to advance your personal goals, like access and allies. You don't really care about the tank you're pushing on the table. It's a pawn. Then there's actor stance, where you take the position of the character in the world. And then there's above that, then there's kind of like an authorial or director stance, where you are taking the position of an author who's trying to create interesting events for the character in the world. And then above that is the director stance, where you're doing it for other characters at the table. There's a really good example I can give to explain how this works. So imagine you're playing a horror game, and your objective is to drive home from work on a rainy night down a winding road. And in a real life situation, your objective is to get home. Like, you just want to drive home. In an RPG of the sort I would design, perhaps the GM would say, because of the challenging weather conditions and the dangerous road, you need to make a driving throw. Oh, you failed your driving throw. Let's roll for your crash. Okay, your vehicle has crashed. Here are your options. Oh, look, there's a scary house on the hill. And you can go investigate the house on the hill. That's the progress of the horror game. In a game with author stance, what happens is, in a narrative game often, what happens is the player says, I think it would be an interesting a plot twist if my car broke down in front of this scary house. So I'll take 2 brownie points in exchange for having my car break down in front of the scary house. And now I'll go into the scary house. And at that point, you're totally divorced from any sense of agency or investment in the character, because you've pulled back to where you're this author. And that, to me, that was when I realized this is the difference between the two types of games. And this is why I'm so committed to this other type of game. Because, I can be an author anytime I want. I can write a story. I can tell a story with my friends. I can read books. But that sense of total agency in an objective game world is what's unique, I think, to tabletop games. And so that led to kind of the development of the simulationist theory.
Yeah, I'm running a game right now, Gods of the Forbidden North, Rob Alderman's game, and out of nostalgia, I started using Rule Cyclopedia. But quickly, I'm starting to reference Adventure Conqueror King, and we're probably going to start shifting in that direction. And I have a couple of, for lack of a better term, story gamers in my in-person gaming crew that I've been gaming with them for decades.
Yeah.
So how do I want to say this? Understanding that the sort of die roll, the randomness from the die roll, that sort of application of the game engine of the physics of the world is actually going to be the source of the story, or at least their interaction with the consequences of that die roll, because they're used to things like, well, this would be interesting if we went and did that thing.
Right.
I'm actually kind of, because only learned about the Forge through seeing you talk and some of the stuff you've written, and to some extent, ironically, Venture Satanis. But so I'm actually kind of shocked when I hear the Forge actually say what they're saying about actually running these games. But it's always been my experience, and I think this, I guess, just because I haven't encountered like the higher level conversation on that, has been like these games that we're presented with are kind of on this sliding scale. In some respects it's a war game, but in other respects there's sort of like this narrative element.
Yeah.
So my question to you is like, where does player age for you, for a simulationist, where does the player agency end, and where does it begin and where does it end? Like, how much agency is it that big of a deal if a player is, how do I want to say this, like playing the game in order to effectuate an outcome? Does that, see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, look, opinions vary. I'm not, I think, as close-minded perhaps as the Forge guys were on these matters. So there are some folks who take a very, very hardline view that you should only know what your character knows. There should be no metagaming. You should only make the decisions as your character would make them. And they try and, absolutely minimize the mechanical interaction with the game world sometimes. So they're very, very heavily focused on, I guess, the narrative of the simulation, if that makes sense, or the acting out of the part. Then there's like the gang over the classic adventure gaming circles, the CAG guys. They enjoy a little bit of ironic distance from the character. Like, it's kind of hilarious if Bob gets turned into a ghoul, because then we can make fun of him.
Right.
At the same time, there's a certain level of seriousness about playing the game as a game, maximizing your experience points, maximizing your gold. And the CAG guys, for instance, like, they will, if you don't use obvious metagame knowledge just to keep yourself alive, they're going to think you're sort of a stupid and a bad player. Like, yeah, you're a first level character with 5 wisdom, but we all know that vampires level drain. Why did you let yourself get level drain? Like, that was just dumb, Bob. Like, why are you doing that? By the way, Bob was actually a player in my high school group, and he was always the guy who did those things. So like, Bob is always my example of like, yeah. So it's his name was it was Bob Watts, and so we used to be like, it's elementary, my dear Watts. Anyway. So anyway, so poor Bob. All these years later, we still reference Bob for these things. Anyway, so I think there's a broad spectrum. For me at my table, I think there's a place for metagaming. In Axe, I try to incorporate metagaming by calling it the adventuring proficiency. So the adventuring proficiency represents your kind of accumulated knowledge of the world, but it's not 100% reliable. And a great example would be, let's say you run into a slime on the dungeon floor, and the GM describes it as a mustard-colored slime. So as a player, you're like, okay, I've played a lot of D&D. I know what yellow mold is. Probably if we touch this, it's going to produce deadly spores. And you avoid it. But what you don't have is the certainty in game of, I'm going to make a knowledge slimes check to confirm that this is yellow mold, right? So adventuring proficiency gives you your excuse to use your metagaming knowledge, but it doesn't confirm it in the game world in the way that like lore mastery proficiency might. Okay, so that's how I handle metagaming. And then when it comes time to sometimes some gamers, particularly store gamers, they enjoy having kind of like a meta currency where they can affect the game world. I think that can be fine and fun. Some folks really, really appreciate it. They like that ability to kind of tweak things. I just think it's important to be diegetic to the game world. So it's representing something, right? Like in Ascendant, you have hero points and they represent your heroic 0-point energy manipulation. So more powerful heroes have more hero points that they can use to adjust their powers. In Axe, it's fate points. It's the influence of fate. Some people are fated, chosen ones, that kind of thing. What I dislike is when it's, what rubs me the wrong way, and it's just a personal thing, is when it's completely metagame with no relationship to the game world at all. Like bennies, like what the heck is a benny in Savage?
Right.
So, but whereas force points in Star Wars don't bother me at all. I'm like, I love force points. I use my force point. I trust in the force.
I trust in the force as well, sir. Real quick, we got to get to
Chubby super chat. I got a couple of super chats here. Okay, Chubby. $10. Thank you. Thank you, Chubby. It is acceptable to abandon all of your prepared questions for Macris and spend 100% of remaining time discussing the glory of dwarves and discussing each chapter by this axe in turn in depth. I would agree, but there's some other things we got to talk about.
Probably
Sir.
not what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But hey, Chubby, please put any question you have in particular about that in there. We've got to be nice to Chubby no matter how much he interrupts the show, because when we get drunk at North Texas, he throws us over his big shoulders and carries
Yes.
us home and
Yeah.
tucks
He
us.
also promised to pay the first round because of all that shadow dark money. Anyway, we got $2 from Mercurius. Bob was right. Thank you, sir.
All right. I don't know what Bob was right about, but he was right about something.
Go ahead, Gary.
No. If you got a train of thought, I'm just thinking of questions I've been thinking of all week. Where did when Axe came about?
Yeah.
Was it were you transitioning from a different rule set, or did you make a decision? I'm going to write these rules. I'm going to write D&D the way it should be, or I mean, what was the evolution?
Oh yeah, sure. So Axe arose from me getting to the old school Renaissance. So circa late aughts, so 2008, 2009, I'd been playing D&D 3.5, kind of that era was winding down. D&D 4th edition was coming out. I didn't like the direction D&D 4th edition was going because of the disassociated mechanics. Like the mechanics felt very abstractly unrelated to the game world. I didn't like how minions worked because there was no real basis for why something was a minion and what was it simulating. And so I thought, and at that point, my friend Alan Varney wrote an article on The Escapist about the old school Renaissance. And I thought, that sounds like a great idea. I should go back and get out my old red box. So I literally got out my old red box with like my crushed die with a crayon on it. And nice. I was like, guys, we're doing this. But me being me, I thought to myself, I should get all the stuff back out. So I went and I got, also my BE CMI rules, and I got all my gazetteers out, and I just kind of started going into it. And I had always wanted to do a campaign that involved like massive domains and massive army fighting and whatnot. And it turned out that when I kind of dived back into BX and BECME, there wasn't really a lot of rules for mass combat. And so I thought to myself, well, I've designed a bunch of war games in my day, and I should do. I actually was a war game designer before I was a tabletop game designer. I should do mass combat for D&D. I should figure that out. And so I actually created Domains at War before I created Axe, and so Axe was essentially my slow translation of my original BX campaign, kind of converging towards what I was building with Domains at War, when I started building Domains at War, I thought to myself, well, I should go back and look at Chainmail and see what they did for Chainmail. And I noticed in Chainmail that the balance between fighters and mages was different, and fighters were relatively more powerful back then. And I thought, this is, we need to solve this. There's this problem in D&D 3.5 and 4 with the
my
linear
favorite
fighters.
Axe 2 is Cleave.
Yeah, the linear fighters and the quadratic mages. So I thought, I need to fix this. Then when I looked at Chainmail, I was like, this is a great game, but Chainmail, it only really scales up to 1 to 10 scale. Like that's not big enough. Like I want to do Battle of Kane with 100,000 guys on the table. What do I need to do for that? So how do I work out the scale? And then I stumbled into another problem. It's like, well, if you've got this much gold flying around, how do you control the leveling? Like, this makes dragon hordes look, the bounty that Alexander the Great gets looks massive, makes Smog's horde look, pitiful. So then how do we handle that? And how do you handle the XP for that? And then I developed the GP threshold rules, which power the campaign XP mechanics in Axe. So essentially, Axe emerged from starting with that base model of BX and then changing it so that it would create the sort of war game outcome that I wanted at the end. And so then I launched it gleefully expecting everyone to be like, this is so great. This is the best war game RPG hybrid ever. I can't wait to break out my miniatures and do Domains at War battles. And actually, almost nobody played that. They were like, this is a great version of D&D with really great economics. Love the economics, man. And the economics were just there. They were just there to do the logistics for the warfare, but almost nobody did the warfare. So apparently, and I stumbled into it with my own players as well. Like I was like, don't don't you guys want to go be iron-fisted tyrants and rule the world? And they were like, nah, bro.
I'm experiencing something very similar in that Gods of the North campaign. I'm doing like one-to-one time, and I'm asking them to try to engage in downtime to help like kind of develop what their characters are doing and maybe find plot hooks, whatever. And your hijinks tables is like really what I've been focusing on, because while not, I think there's one rogue in the party, all of them are engaged in hijinks in some way, shape, or form during downtime. And those tables have been just like awesome. But I keep telling them, like, you guys can do this, you can do that, blah, blah, blah. They wanted to buy a tavern and invest in it. And so they're just happy just taking an arrow to the knee and making money at a tavern. That's what they want to do right now. And I'm like,
Yep.
don't you want to conquer the North? Like,
Nope.
nah, we're good.
Nope.
We're making money. We're good.
Yeah. I had to put. I'm sure you guys have read in the Judge's Journal. I put the advice in. I'm like, make all of the NPC rulers like either incompetent, decadent, corrupt, jerks. Have this big threat, and maybe the players would be like, well, I guess to save the world, we'll have to take over. Twist my arm.
Yeah.
All right, we got another super chat. Let's see. It's Vault Dweller, $11. Thank you very much. Good to see you. Glory to our goal. Glory to the Argale. Glory to the High King. Glory to Elvenkind. Oh, there's going to be a war between Chubby and this guy. Support the fantastic Alexander Macris by supporting his magnum opus, for which Acts 2 exists before all others. I did support that because I loved By This Axe, as I mentioned before we started the stream. It's actually how I discovered Adventure Conqueror King. I think it was DM James. I was just happened to be sort of perusing By This Axe during one of his live streams, and I mentioned something about it, and he's like, you got to get it, Adventure Conqueror King, you got to check this out. And so that's when I started looking into it and stuff. So thank you for the super chat. And yes, before all others, I think that's I actually love that name too. It captures like the elven sort of superiority.
Yeah, superiority complex. Yeah,
I kind of do hate elves, but I was listening to you talk on another show about how, and I wasn't able to like really listen to it because I have children everywhere. I reproduce. That's what I do in this life. And you were saying something about you got your inspiration from the elves, from like Eastern more. I in my mind, because I probably was interrupted after you said that, I was thinking Oriental Adventures or something like that from back in the day. Am I on the right track?
Yep. So yes, I had started off with just based on where they are in the Arryn Empire map in Acts, and based on Tolkien, using Welsh for Sindarin, and the old stories of the Tuatha De Danann, etc. I had Celtic was my original inspiration for the elves. But the problem, of course, is that Celtic culture was exceptionally violent, and it was largely driven by cattle raiding. Didn't really have very many cities, and cattle raiding culture has all these implications, which they tends to create like a very sort of short-term economic focus, because your entire wealth can be stolen all at once. It creates this frontier mentality, honor culture, all these things, which are cool, but they're not entirely correct for elves if you think about these people that live, really long times and they nurture the forest, right? So then I thought, well, where can I find, because I really like to base my cultures on real world cultures to give like that grounded hook. I'm like, where can I find a culture where they've got like honor, and they've also got like really long-term economics, where they do a lot of care and attention, and they've got spiritualism and nature worship. I was like, Japan. And so, Heian era through early shogunate era Japan turns out to have this amazing overlap with the elves, right? So like your wizards are like your Onimyodo, right? Whereas your druids are like your Shinto priests. Your Nightblades are like your ninja. Your elven warriors are like your samurai. Your elven courtiers at the court are like the Heian era nobility, the non-violent nobility.
Yep.
There was a direct correlation. And then the forest gardening is effectively the rice farms, right? Where you have to really invest in the paddies, you drain them, you spend a lot of effort. It's communal. It's exceptionally high caloric output on a small acreage footprint. So you have lots of forest and mountains. it was perfect. And so essentially what elves worked out to be is kind of like a Celtic wrapper on a Japanese core, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It just
Yeah.
so much sense. And like I said before, I pretty much hate elves, but I might not hate yours. Yours might be okay. I might let them live. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, they're pretty obnoxious for sure. You know
They
what's
are.
funny is elves. When I was doing dwarves, like everybody agrees on dwarves, right? You're just like, I'm doing this with the dwarves, and they're like, absolutely, that's dwarfish, dwarfology, dwarven,
Yeah,
dwarven,
you got
right?
mushroom farms.
Right,
It's
like
like, yeah.
everybody's into it, right? And then with elves, man, opinions are so hotly divided. You've got like, no, I want broken sword elves. No, I want Noldor elves. No, I want Dragonlance wood elves. I want like, elf mean, I want Keebler elves. Elf means something different to everybody. There's
Yeah.
even a TV trope about this, right? All dwarves are the same. Our elves are different. That's been by
Mhm.
far the hardest part about doing the book is that with dwarves, it was like a festival of love. Everything I did, I'm like, they've got axes, yay! Like, and
Exactly.
with elves, it's like, wait a minute, let's discuss the exact length and curvature of the sword that's being used here,
Right,
because
right.
the
Yeah.
direction you're going doesn't feel entirely elvish to me, Alex. It's just like much harder.
That's great. I don't take offense to the treatment of halflings in Acts, but I don't agree. I really don't. Which
Gary's our resident halflingophile.
I might be a hobbit in real life. It's possible.
I, I can defend my position. I'll defend my position.
And you know what? I know better than to start that argument. Okay, I'm not
All
going
right.
into it, but I think you're wrong. Anyway, you had mentioned basing everything on a real world place, and before this, you had said you got out Beckme and you got out your Gazetteers. I love the old Gazetteers.
They're
Like
so good.
all my black little heart, like that's the part that's still a kid. I open those up and I just love them. Is that where that came from? It kind of is that sort of did that influence feed into?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Gazetteers were hugely influential on me.
And why do you think? Well, we probably shouldn't go there. Yeah, it's gonna get weird. I think that's the best way to make worlds. I think it makes them relatable. I really enjoy doing that. And I was gonna ask, why don't people do that anymore? But the answer is obvious, because somebody's gonna get mad. Anyway,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. And that's really sad. I really I'm glad you're doing it. You know what I mean?
Oh, I freely culturally appropriate from everyone. I'm shameless and just yeah.
Well, and I sometimes I want to ask people, like, have you ever been t-shirt shopping in Tokyo? Because they're not afraid to appropriate
Right.
anything over there. If it's cool, it goes on the shirt.
Yeah.
And it's just the way it is. It's saying, hey, I like this. So I wish more creators would kind of take the lead. I think, Lamentations of the Flame Princess and Axe. And I can't think of too many others that are still incorporating that into their design. So
Yeah.
thanks,
Yeah.
man. I enjoyed a lot. What was your favorite Gazetteer?
Glantry.
Everybody's a Glantry, man.
Yeah.
I'm a
Although
Northern Reaches guy.
The stuff from Glantry didn't actually make it into Axe, but I really liked it. The most influential were the two mercantile ones, the pirates and the Darrican.
Yeah.
Was it the Mithroad guilds?
Yeah, Mintra Hills,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That is a good one.
Yeah. I also really like the one about the beastmen, the orcs, the humanoids, orcs of Thar, I think it was.
Yeah.
And that influenced me a little
Mad
bit.
Max
That
game.
influenced me a little bit when I was writing some Axioms articles about beastmen and orcs. So that was good fun.
I remember as a kid, I was really upset with that because I thought I was going to get this serious.
It was a little silly. Yeah.
It was real silly, and I was at that age where silly, like, just couldn't be cool.
Well, I think what happened there is that it was right. It was that, like, if you want to talk about like you're going to get in trouble, like doing orc humanoids as savages, but doing it seriously like that they were going to get in trouble, and they did, at that point in the publishing, they were trying to avoid those problems, and so they didn't. So.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So I can ask you about Axe all night. We got the elves, we got the dwarves, and I'm sure we're going to come back to Axe, but I do have to ask you, Ascendant, why did you make it too hard for me to play?
Oh no, is it too hard for you to play? I'm
No,
sorry.
it's been a running gag that
I haven't even I haven't attempted yet. I've gone through, you know how you kind of flip through a rule book and you're like,
Yeah.
I'll get the gist of this, and then, like, you know, with Rob, he'll just sit down and play a game he hasn't even opened and just kind of learn it on the go.
Right.
Ascendant is not that game. What possessed you to make all the tables and charts, and how long did it take? And like,
sure, yeah.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah, so well, I was a huge fan of like the 1980s era of superhero games, Phase Rip, the Marvel game, and Megs, the DC game. And Phase Rip had this really nice color-coded tables for action resolution. But it had some things I didn't like for instance, if you did amazing damage and I had amazing armor, you could literally never hurt me, right? Your amazing damage was always blocked. And also it didn't really match the scales of the strength. So like amazing strength was supposed to be able to lift 10 tons, but you didn't really hurt people as if you actually could hurt people with a 10-ton punch. Okay. So meanwhile, over at Megs, Greg Gordon did what I thought was a really genius game design. It was the first logarithmic game design where each point of your score represented a doubling of capacity. So, you know, if my strength was 5 and your strength was 6, you were twice as strong with me. If your strength was 7, you were 4 times as strong with me. I thought that was really cool. And they made that work for like the lifting and the throwing and the running speeds and all of that. But then for whatever reason, they didn't implement it when it came to the actual damage. So like Batman, for instance, has a body of 6 in DC Heroes. But you can take out Batman by doing 6 1-point hits or 1 6-point hit. But if you're saying, well, no, this is exponential, a 6-point hit is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 times as powerful as a 1-point hit. So it doesn't make sense that you can take Batman out with 6 1-point hits. So I thought to myself, well, clearly what I need to do is I need to make a truly logarithmic game that follows through on the promise of DC Heroes, but it's fully logarithmic. And also it needs to have color-coded results, so it'll be as simple to play at the table as Marvel. And the advantage of doing a truly logarithmic game that no one had ever done before was that it becomes scale-free. What I mean by that is that you can play at human scale and it plays fine. And you can play at street scale and it plays fine. Marvel scale, fine. DC scale, fine. God scale, it's fine. And also because it's truly exponential, it's truly logarithmic all the way through, you can actually do things like, well, I'm just going to say that instead of representing 1 soldier, this represents 1,920 soldiers. And this represents 256 tanks, not 1 tank. And we're just going to use the logarithmic scaling to scale up their firepower and their resilience accordingly. And it turned out that logarithms were like the secret to simulation. I had some really funny incidences when I was designing the game. I had a guy who's a nuclear submariner on my Discord message me, and he's like, "Hey man, how did you get the data for the submarine stats?" And I'm like, I don't know. I just kind of calculated them based on some stuff I read online and did some math. And he's like, "Yeah, it's just that the some of the data output there is classified." And I was like, "Oh, my bad, bro." And then I had a buddy who used to run a company that he did consulting work for DARPA and the National Reconnaissance Office, and he like introduced me to DARPA because he thought they should be using Ascendant for some of their simulations because of like the scale-free logarithmic approach. And I'm just like, you would like to use my superhero game to help you with national defense? You know, okay. So
incredible.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope it's not too hard to play. The actual game mechanics is really simple. It's just got a lot of tables.
Yeah, Mr. I joke, and you know, I tell this to when I'm talking about Ascendant with people, because here's the thing: I've got so many games planned and so many children that I'm never going to get to everything. You know, to be quite honest, your judge's journal is open regardless of what game I'm playing. You know, like I had an OSE game that went for a while. It's, you know, I use it as a reference for that all the time. I don't know that I found the group that has the commitment level to actually see acts through. You know, I just don't know that I have those kind of players. I'm working on it. I have a secret project. I've roped some people into some things. and I think it can happen. But I feel like, I don't like if I start an OSE game and everybody drops out and I'm finding new players every week, whatever. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I think a game like Axe and Ascendant, I think they deserve a little bit more respect coming in. And quite honestly, I'm going to need players who want to understand the game themselves, because I'm not as smart as you guys. I'm going to forget things. I tell all my
Well,
players, to
the,
remember, hey,
the
if I mess this up, tell me. I want
well,
it to be a partnership as opposed to
Yeah.
I'm entertaining you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, at Arnicon, I got to play in your game,
Yeah.
Alex, and you showed up with like a visual representation of how this logarithm thing works. And as soon as you pulled that out and kind of explained it, like it clicked. And it is actually, I think it's actually quite easy to play. And I think once you understand the doubling, and like
Yeah.
I guess I'm a visual guy,
Right.
one of those kind of learners, but I do think it is one of those games that you just got to play it and work
Yes.
through it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I do agree. My first time looking at it and the charts, I was like, did this guy just like break through the matrix? Like, what is this? This is insane. But it's pretty cool. I'm really glad I got a chance to play, because like I said, it
Well,
just like clicked. I have a couple super chats and some questions though I got to get to real quick here. We have my ear trumpet $5. Thank you, sir. The Celts weren't just about cattle raids, they were also sheep raids as well. Okay.
absolutely.
It's true.
Let's see, I'm gonna get to this super chat and then Chubby's question. $5 from Disco. Hey man, thank you so much. Good to see you, brother. Yard dog brothers and sword sisters. Hope everyone's year is off to a great start. Excited you got Alexander to show up for my birthday.
Hey,
Now entertain me.
Birthday.
Happy birthday, Disco. Good to see you, man. I hope it's a good one. And then Chubby's got a question that I actually missed, those from earlier. What is going on with Grey Brotherhood? It is my favorite live play series of all time. I would love to see you do another live play with new content to explore.
Yeah. So it's nothing like terrible. So what happened was we the group was playing very, very regularly. My brother, Arcanus Will, he plays the magic user in the campaign. Started to face some challenges at work that were just really eating up his time, and so we kept recording the videos, but we weren't releasing them because we didn't have time to edit them. And then I started having health problems. I had kind of a really rough last 6 months with a lot of brain fog and fatigue, and ended up having to have surgery in late October, and then I was knocked on my butt for a month. And so, I cut down on my streaming schedule, and I put both of my campaigns on hold. I put my Grey Brotherhood campaign on hold, and I put my Pirates campaign on hold, because I didn't have the energy, I didn't have the mojo. So the intent is to go back to both games, and when we do that, we'll bring the Grey Brotherhood back. The group still exists. We all know where everybody is. At some point, if my brother Willie isn't able to do the editing anymore, we might have to find someone who can do the editing for it, because it's not like an enormous amount of work, but it's enough work that if you're hard pressed and pulling 80-hour work weeks or something at the office, like, it's hard to fit it in.
Something tells me that amongst the RPG community that pays attention, there is somebody who has editing experience that would be willing to help you. I don't think it'd be too hard to find somebody.
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, no, we have some great episodes filmed, like some absolute jaw-dropping stuff happened in some of the unpublished episodes yet. So I do hope we get them out there.
I've noticed you have I've been to your Discord channel, and you've got a lot of people playing games and interacting on the channel. You seem to have built your own community, and I'm curious how that affects. Does that affect what you decide to publish, and where what's the relationship between community and making games? Like, how are you doing that?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny you bring this up. Most people don't know this, but it's a fun place to share it. So way back when, in 1999, was when I started my first company. It was called Warcry, and I raised the money for it while I was at law school. We raised $400,000. we had the misfortune of launching literally the month of the dot-com crash, and we never were able to raise another dollar and went out of business. But or pivoted, really. We kind of reskinned and pivoted. But the original concept of Warcry was that it was going to be an online game platform, and essentially Steam. What Steam built. We thought this up in 1999. It was me, my brother, and two other fellows. My Harvard roommate Jake Kuhn, and then our CFO Paulo Lima. And the four of us came up with this idea, and we were going to break the studio system of game development, because what we would do is we would put indie developers directly in contact with the community, and the community would be able to do what we called audience pulled development. So people would come out with the first level or a demo or an early action of the game. Then we would see what was most popular via community feedback. There'd be an investment fund to help those games get more investment. There'd be promotion, marketing for them. We had a system built out called game tokens to do microtransactions for freemium games. We had all of this worked out in 1999, 2000. And the VCs were like, yeah, this is ridiculous. No one would ever be into this. And and it just so anyway, out of the humiliation of that failure, my next company was called Themis Group, and I was completely convinced. I'm like, community is the future of games, right? Like the idea of you buy a game and a cartridge and you play it by yourself is over. It's going to be driven by online communities. So my next business was this company called Themis Group, and the goal of Themis Group was to help guys that were creating massively multiplayer games manage their communities and build their games with their support of their community. And our first client was Funcom, and Funcom had launched Anarchy Online to disastrous reviews. And they hired Themis, and we came in and we did a year of consulting with them. And a year later, they won PC Game of the Year. And so that kind of built my rep in the industry.
wow.
As, okay, Alex really understands community. So I did that for 4 years. And then I said, we're going to create our own game community now. We're going to create Rolling Stone for gamers. And that was The Escapist. And we launched The Escapist in 2005, and I built that, and we won 7 Webby Awards for best game site, best lifestyle site. We beat Martha Stewart for best lifestyle. It was fantastic. I have a picture of me with like Martha, and she's like so upset. It's just fantastic. And we at Themis, we essentially invented community management. We were the very first professional community management company for video games, and likewise, I was one of the very first people to do community management professionally for a game company at The Escapist. And we had our whole community gamified long before anybody else did that. So you unlocked badges and all these things that they did on Xbox, whatnot. We kind of had all that built into The Escapist. So it's been in my portfolio of knowledge for 2 decades. And so that's what I've tried to do with Autark, is build up a community. Granted, it's a more niche community because the topic is less mainstream than video games, but I think it's a really good community for what it is, and I take great pains to pay attention to what my community says, and to really understand what's working for them and what's not working for them, what product they like, what they don't like. I spend hours every week chatting with folks, and I think it's hugely valuable. It's Autark's competitive advantage.
That's great to hear. I know Matt has a question, but just one real quick follow-up.
I was actually referring to Chubby's question. So go ahead. Yeah.
Do they have any direct, do you do polls, or do they have any direct say on what's coming next?
Yeah. So on for Ascendant, the Ascendant Patreon, we do a poll every month, and they decide which character is going to get created next for the Ascendant universe. And then in the Chat of Kings, I regularly do polls there to poll my users, ask them their opinion on various topics. A lot of time, I do a monthly live stream with both groups to get their opinion on things, and then we just have a lot of really casual, informal talks. Yeah, I would definitely say there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of influence. I mean, the community would be probably better able to tell you like specific things that they've seen me do that have been really pleasing to them. But I certainly try and listen.
Did you with respect to like the kind of conversations you have as and you said it kind of like it helps inform you and influence what you do. I mean, does this include even just feedback with like beta test material and stuff? I mean, is that part of
Oh
like your
yeah.
process
Yeah,
with
yeah,
your
totally.
community?
I mean, I'll give you a great example, right? Was the Ranger class. So I released the Ranger class on Axioms last year, the Elven Ranger. Thought it was a good class build. And but the community was dissatisfied with it, right? Like I got some feedback on it. And the number one complaint was that the Ranger had no ability to help players evade wilderness encounters. And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And it turned out, as I talked to several of the power users and the GMs running the biggest campaigns, a lot of them were doing really big, sprawling wilderness hex crawls, and the groups that would go on the wilderness hex crawls were relatively small parties. And so it was really important to them that they be able to evade wilderness encounters, and it had made the explorer the class of choice for leading these expeditions because the explorer has this big benefit to evade. And they said if the elves don't have this, we would never play an all elf party because we just wouldn't do it. We need an elf who can help us evade. But then, okay, well, we'll just give the elf the evasion power. Well, the problem then you've cut off the balls of the explorer because that was his central shtick, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and so we went back and forth. Well, what if we did this? What if we did this? What if I gave this power? Would this make you guys happy? What about this power? And I think we chatted about it like probably 2-3 hours a day for about a week until
Wow.
finally I hit on a solution that preserved the explorer's uniqueness, but also gave the elves a way to have an evasion via their rangers. And then there was much cheering and now that's the new official ranger build. So that's like a great example. The really big takeaway for me, and I should have known it because of becoming known as the economics guy instead of as the war game guy, is that how I designed Axe and then how Axe was actually played was really different, right? Like there are some groups that just never ever touch the domain play stuff at all, but they love it for everything other than that. And then there are groups that are using it for like sprawling wilderness colonization with almost no settlements and no markets, and they're building up from scratch. And then there are other groups that are like, well, we never left Cipheron, we just did it as a thieves guild campaign, right? And you can, because the game is very voluminous, it can cover all of these things. Um, but because of that, their experiences of what the game is like end up being really different. So, for instance, the fellow Arbithril who runs these big sprawling wilderness games, in his campaign, virtually everybody ends up ruling their own domain. And so to him, the idea of a character who doesn't get to have his own domain, but who only gets like a hideout or something like that, it's like, well, no, you got to be able to also have a domain. Like nobody wants to be the support guy. But then meanwhile, we have another group,
Right.
running Oceans 11 AD, where they're all literally doing hideouts. Like there's not a single domain ruler at all. And a big part of the art of it is sort of like trying to take in this fire hose of feedback and then make sense of it. Um,
Yeah.
and what I saw in the video game industry is that largely what happens is that video game developers lose touch with their own community. They become clueless about what the game experience is actually like. And it gets to the point, especially in MMOs, where the seasoned MMO players dread patches coming out. They dread the updates because they just know
Right.
it's going to ruin something. It's going to not be done well. And so then what happens is then they try and set up like class liaisons and race liaisons on the forums, and it becomes political, and the big guilds are lobbying for this, and you've got to nerf stealth archers because they're bad for PvP, and it just turns into this whole, like, I saw this repeatedly in the MMO space, so I've kind of learned those lessons. It's kind of like if you can manage a community of 100,000 people paying you, $15 a month, so they can play 40 hours a week. Like you can manage any community. That's PhD.
Well, I think it's not surprising to me actually that you have this like diverse experience coming from the people who are giving you feedback. I don't know, did you I mean, you probably sort of kind of answered this already because you did say you started out wanting to make a war game and then you had this sort of economics
Yeah.
thing come out. But when this first when did it dawn on you that Adventure Conqueror King could pretty much do all of this stuff that people are did you like sort of lean in on that moving
Yeah.
forward?
Yeah. I would say the transition point when I started to really lean into it was when I launched Axioms and I began to do every month like a specific new game mechanic in some area of interest. And so we very quickly like, oh, you wanted to play Chaotic Beastmen? Here's the Chaotic Beastmen issue where you can do that. Oh, you wanted to create new life forms? Here's the Arcanogenesis rules. Oh, you want to create your own spell types? Here's these rules, etc. And there's a game designer who spends a lot of time on our Discord called Omer Joel, and he told me once, he was, I think, the first person to say this, and he said that what he loved about Axe was that it was fractal. It's fractal. You could zoom out and it had a beautiful shape to it, but you could zoom in and there was just as much detail in any given aspect of the game, and then you could zoom in again and there was even more detail. I thought that's awesome. I want to be fractal. So that was.
That's the best description. When I first got the books and was reading them, and I would say, "Oh, I'm into Acts 2. We need to put something together," And here and there, I'd hear somebody say, "Oh, it seems really complicated." And after reading, it was like, "No, it's not complicated. It's thorough."
Yeah,
it's
thorough.
Yeah.
And it's modular, just like any other game. You can pull if you don't want to mess with it. I'm not going to worry about the economy when I'm running a party of level 1 to 3. Like,
Right.
I'm probably not going to deal with that.
Yep.
But it does cover all those things. I think fractal is the absolute best description. And I've heard you talk before about top-down design. Like when I think it was in relation to world building actually, but it feels like the same attitude. Like you started with the war game and then moved it down.
Yeah.
Which seems to be the opposite. Everybody now is start small, village in a dungeon, in a dungeon. I just ran an OSE game for a while. I thought top down was great. I took your advice in the judge's journal, and I don't like huge mega dungeons, so I had little dungeons spread out, and it was a lot of fun. And I think, anyway, I'm just going on. Your judge's book is great, man. I feel like Chris.
Thank you.
You remember that time when
I'm
having a
starting to break up again, Gary. You're doing so well.
Yeah, you're most back.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, I was just saying I was having my Chris Farley moment. You remember that time? Oh, that was really cool. Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks, man.
Kind of pivoting back over to Ascendant and the sort of your community involvement. Shortly after Arnicon, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, you started putting together what I'm just going to call like a Bro SR style Ascendant game where you have all these has that been in one, I don't is that still going, number one, and number two, is that informing, giving you any feedback that inform like what you're going to do with Ascendant moving forward?
So it's called Living Ascendant, and it was inspired by partly by the efforts of the Bro SR to encourage people to get out of single party play and embrace kind of like shifting cast of characters and things like that, and one-to-one time, and then also by these old things from the RPGA called Living Greyhawk, Living Forgotten Realms, etc. And so it's a living campaign. It runs on one-to-one time, and all of the players are members of Dreadnought, which is essentially a private superhero police organization with a license from the government to provide police services. And each of the GMs is simultaneously the GM of a particular region, but he's also the head of a local district office of Dreadnought. And so you've got the head of the local district office of Dreadnought Baltimore, Dreadnought San Francisco, Dreadnought Miami, Dreadnought Atlanta, etc. Each of them is a GM. And so they have control over their region. And the players are part of the rapid response team for Dreadnought. And so every player can appear in any mission. He's got, we've got a crisis in Atlanta. And so, and it's whoever's available that night is the rapid response team for that night. And if a particular GM gets busy and he doesn't have time to run any adventures in Atlanta, it just means everything's under control in Atlanta. Low crime this month in Atlanta, Whereas like, if a particular GM has a lot of free time, like crime wave in Atlanta, And so so we get drop in and drop out GMs, drop in and drop out players. you get points to build your character for every session you attend. You can hit a cap. If you hit the cap, then additional points either go into a reserve you can use if your character gets killed or crippled, which sort of helps with like that superheroes don't die vibe, or you can send the points over to a backup character. And then it's free for everyone. And what we did was there's a few powers in Ascendant that require like a lot of bookkeeping. It's like invention, for instance, requires a lot of bookkeeping work, and you have to kind of take into account what's the current state of the art. And so we pay gated like kind of the bookkeeping powers to the Patreon. So like anyone can participate, but if you want to have a whole bunch of characters with all the bookkeeping powers, then you got to be a paid member of the Patreon. I think most of the people that are in the paid Patreon are participating, but a ton of free players as well. And it's been going really well. We had I think almost 2 sessions a week every week since it's launched, and player base is growing. Guys are having a blast. So it slowed down a little bit over the holidays, obviously, but yeah.
Are these adventures and characters and whatnot informing some of the stuff you've been doing on the comic book side of things?
Well, the comic book is set kind of a couple of years prior. I'm kind of telling the story. I'm telling the
Okay.
story of the of kind of the founding of the Star Spangled Squadron and its first encounters and whatnot. Now, that said, there was an opportunity when you backed the graphic novel to insert yourself as a character, and so we do have 2 people in the graphic novel are characters who were inserted. And also at each of the Kickstarters, there's been opportunities to back and insert characters into the game world. So several of the characters that are in the game world are backer insert characters, which is fun. I like that kind of thing. The main thing we're taking away from the Living Ascendant is insights into how different groups play the game and some of the fun exploits that folks have found, and that's informing us as we do our work. That's informing us as we do our work on the next supplement for Ascendant, which is called Power Overwhelming.
Cool. Very cool. We got something from Chubby. Let's see here. Matt, how have you seen Patreon develop as a pillar of your overall strategy compared to other elements like Discord, Twitter, direct sales, Kickstarter?
That's a great question. Yeah. So on average, let's see. So I have fundamentally 3 revenue streams for Autark. Revenue stream number 1 is crowdfunding. I aim to do 1 to 2 crowdfunders a year. I've never actually succeeded in regularly doing 2 per year. It's been at best 1.5 and earlier sometimes 1 every 18 months. But my goal would be if I could do several per year because they're obviously the big money makers. Then and right now we're doing on average 30 to 50K for an Ascendant Kickstarter and 100 to 150K for an Axe Kickstarter or crowdfunder or BackerKit or whatnot. I've been using BackerKit more and more because their platform's really good. Then Drive-Thru RPG. So Drive-Thru RPG revenue is it isn't as spiky as Kickstarter or BackerKit, but it's still got spikes. Like when Treasure Tome became available on Drive-Thru RPG and it was on the bestseller charts, we had a really good month, and then it kind of goes back down. So I would say on a good month, on a really good month, you make 3 or 4 times as much as I make from the Patreon on Drive-Thru RPG, but on an average month, about the same amount. And so then finally, I have my Patreon, and the Patreon basically throws off enough each month that I can just pay my mortgage, which is really great. So like literally, as I try and thank the Chats of Kings and the Ascendants, Assembly of Ascendants every month, because like literally because of Patreon, I know that my mortgage is going to be paid. It is just a very reliable subscription that just covers that expense, and that's like very foundationally secure. And so I really try and go out of my way to let them know that makes a huge difference for a creator, because it's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to have this huge spiky crowdfund and be really successful, and then you have this yawning gap till the next crowdfund and all the stress and what do you do, and just knowing that every month those Patreon subscriptions roll in is really, really viable. So yeah, I do consider one of the foundational aspects of my business. I would say my 3 foundations is, direct sales, crowdfunding, and Patreon.
Kind of off. Well, not really related to that. Actually, pivoting. Someone. Oh, Gary, I think you're breaking up again. Sorry, buddy. Someone in chat mentioned something about SpaceX. Is there plans for any moving into space?
Oh yeah. So well, you remember you asked me, do I ever poll my users? One of the biggest polls I ever did was I polled the users, what game would you like me to make next? And SpaceX was the number one most popular suggestion, followed by Oriental Adventures X was number 2. So for SpaceX, you know, my working title is Aeon Star, so I bought that as the domain name. And then for Oriental Adventures X, it would be Ashigaru Daimyo Shogun. And yeah, so those two got the
Nice.
highest polls. You know, the trick with SpaceX is for it to be SpaceX, right? It would need to have a war game component, an economic component, right? And gosh golly, the economy gets a lot more complex when you go into the sci-fi future.
Yeah.
And gosh golly, warfare gets a lot more complex. And you know, and I get kind of dispirited when I think about science fiction future because of the current state of technology, where it seems really clear that like warfare is turning into autonomous drones and AI is already displacing human creative labor. And so, you know, like you begin to think, well, what would a science fiction future really look like? And so then, depending on my day, I kind of like end up, well, it could be a Butlerian jihad, and you get like a Dune type future, or it could be a post-apocalyptic Mad Max, you know, or cyberpunk. And so I've kind of like I keep sketching out these different directions to go. So yeah, I would love to do a science fiction game. The guys playing in my Pirates game told me that the Pirate Axe is their favorite science fiction game they've ever played. I was like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "Yeah, man, every week we get on our spaceship, we go to a new planet, you know, we sleep with the Orion pirate girls, and you know, and we you know,
Green
we
skinned.
fight some Klingons on the in space." And I'm like, "Oh god, you're right. It's Star Trek."
Well, that's actually an interesting observation though, because like when I think of Axe and I think of Ascendant and your simulationist philosophy, I mean, a space Axe would seems to be it would be more like a hard sciencey kind of thing.
Right.
But when we think of sci-fi, Babylon 5, for
Yep.
example, when we think or like
Right.
Firefly, it's a little bit more high
Right.
adventure, right? A little bit more
Yeah.
swashbucklery. So that's I think that would help.
That would be
That
a
is going to pose some interesting
that'd be a
challenges.
huge undertaking, especially you know with your products being as thorough as they are.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody who's been here for a few weeks knows the game Stars Without Number. I'm really into that. Yeah,
Drink.
sorry, drink.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, Kevin Crawford is a fantastic game designer, and I have historically tried to take what I would call like a blue ocean strategy with my approach to business. So I try to find a niche that other people aren't doing and go sail there rather than try and go head on. So
Sure.
when I launched Axe, for instance, it was when Wizard of the Coast stumbled from the 3 to 4 transition, and so people were looking for an alternative, right? So it was a blue ocean. And when I did Axe 2, likewise, it was this kind of blue ocean where people were upset at 5th edition and the OGL being taken away. When I did Ascendant, it was because all of the major superhero games had migrated into story games, and you know, narrative
Right.
games, and there were very few actively supported high crunch superhero games anymore, and certainly nothing logarithmic. So you know, the existence of like between Traveler and Stars Without Number, it would be very difficult to make the argument that those niches are not well served. So I'd have to think of something different that they're not doing. It's likewise why I haven't done a Cyberpunk game, because Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk Red are really good. And likewise a mecha game, because Battletech and Mechton and Lancer are really good and they fill their niches. So
I also wonder, you know, fantasy is always the highest selling of all the role playing game genres. I wonder when you look at the effort you would put into a sci-fi game, like you know, like is it you're probably not going to get the same return as you would
yeah.
get with Axe. You know, I remember pestering Chubby for like 6 months to do a Red Dead Redemption Shadowrun conversion.
Mm-hmm.
And he broke down the economics to me, and I was like, "Oh, I'm never gonna get my Red Dead.
Oh, we gotta talk about this. So I just finished reading the book Blood Meridian, right? Cormac
Oh,
McCarthy.
great book.
So I know that it's a work of great American literature, one of the greatest American novels, but
Right.
the whole time that I was reading it, I was taking notes for Axe because I'm like, oh my gosh, the Scalp Hunters are a high-level chaotic Axe party. And so I actually mapped out the whole area that it takes place in. It actually takes place on 9 Axe regional maps. And there's a class 3 town, which is Chihuahua City. And then there's 3 class 4 towns at the border. And there's a population density of about 1 person per square mile in that area. And it's post-apocalyptic. So you've got like the Anasazi ruins. You've got all these ruined haciendas. You have the Beastman role is filled by the mobile Comanche types. You literally have high-level adventuring parties go into town with gold pieces and spend them until the economy goes crazy. They get a bounty for bringing back monster parts. I'm like, this is one of the best D&D novels I've ever read.
I've never thought of it that way, and you're so right. I want to play that game.
Right? Yeah. So that actually, I thought to myself, I could do a really, really freaking awesome Western RPG. But holy crap, would it be get me canceled again, because it would be like the least politically correct game ever, right? So you'd have like American scalp hunters like, we're going to systematically kill all of the buffalo just to make sure we take care of this Indian problem. The Indian problem, like they're just Comanche savagery. Blah, blah.
Well, that brings up a question. I'm curious. I mean, I don't, with your community being your community, you've already been canceled. Like what? I mean, I kind of wonder, shouldn't that be a little freeing? Like, fuck yeah, you guys already don't like me. You know what I mean?
It's true. It is freeing. It is freeing. I'm always like, I wonder if they could cancel me more.
Yeah.
You can always get more canceled.
I doubt it. But I think that would be a great game. Blood Meridian. I'm going to have to reread it now so that I can try to put RPG terms. That is great. No, but there is a big thing, there's so many games that I'd like to see certain creators. Oh, wouldn't it be great if this guy did this or this guy did that? I just don't know. I mean, science fiction, even space opera, you do quick economies for every planet. And what is there? And what is it worth here? Oh my God, just, it would be a big, I think it'd be more pages than Acts 2.
Or it would be really, really abstract. So like almost like a plug and play, like roll these die, roll on these charts to see what's going on. In which case that you'd lose some of the character that Axe has, I think. Yeah, I know it's going to be hard. It would be hard.
Yeah, I mean, one way to do it would be to pick a, you could pick a particular aspect of science fiction. So, for instance, if you're doing like as an example, if you're doing an Age of Sail game, you don't also expect your Age of Sail game to necessarily simulate the ability to run a plantation in the Bahamas and also to simulate parliament meetings in London, right? Like you kind of wanted to focus on being a really good Age of Sail game to do piracy and shoot up French ships and things like that, right? So I think like you could do sci-fi acts by doing something like it's going to be Star Trek themed, where you're on a vessel, you go around, explore, you have the sandbox is your sector where you're out of communication. These are your resources on your ship. The economy is ship oriented. How many red shirts do you have available to you per mission? Like that kind of thing. I think you could do.
Well, Ben Gibson was telling us how he was running a Stars Without Number campaign, and that got me really
excited. He's got an awesome Stars Without Number campaign. Yeah.
So as I was trying to put that together, somehow it became the One Ring game. But whatever, we'll get to Stars Without Number.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so, Ben has a fantastic Stars Without Number campaign. He was telling me about it when he was on my show too.
Yeah, he's one of our favorites. Matt, I keep cutting you off like all night.
That's all right. That's fine. That's cool. I'm good. I actually kind of wanted to pivot a little bit. We've talked a lot about your products and your philosophy. But this show, we like to focus on, game mastery and the way we approach games. So, just kind of turning to Arbiter of Worlds, and I've said this before, I think this should be on every game master's shelf if you've take game mastery seriously because there's a lot of good stuff in it. But one of the things I noticed is that you present yourself as you very well spoken, right? You clearly thought through these things, and you clearly have an opinion on how we should be looking at game design and running our games.
Yeah.
But this is actually very, dare I say, judicious and fair, because you weigh different approaches in this. So I'm just going to come out and ask, how do you feel about fudging the dice?
Well, the rule I lay in that book is never fudge a meaningful die roll, right? Never fudge a meaningful die roll. Now, of course, that begs the question, well, what makes a die roll meaningful? Okay. And to answer that question is effectively the reason I wrote the book, right? Like, why should you have dice at all, and why should you not fudge? And so, let me, if there's an example I give in the book, I think, where we can walk through it, but let's imagine that you want your character to attack the dragon in order to save the princess, right? And so you go to attack the dragon, and the DM tells you, all right, well, if you attack the dragon, you have no chance of hitting. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I won't attack the dragon then, right? Like, it is purely an irrational action then if I have no chance of hitting. So immediately we realize that in order to have agency in the world, right, there has to be a chance of hitting. Well, let's say you go to attack the dragon, and the GM says, all right, well, if you attack the dragon, you will certainly hit and kill it. And you're like, okay, well, obviously that is what I should do then. There is no downside to doing that. It is a clear and deterministic outcome that gets me what I want. So I attack and kill the dragon. And he says, great. And the princess automatically falls in love with you. Good game. Well, that is also not a very good game, because again, now you have no agency because the world is deterministic in your favor. So the only way you can have agency is if you can make choices that have consequences. But the only way you can make choices with consequences is if the outcome of your decisions is not entirely foreordained, which means you need to have randomness. But then that means that once you've introduced that randomness, if you take that randomness away by fudging the dice, then you have taken away the very agency which you've sought to reintroduce.
Right.
Now, the justification that people will make is, oh, the players will never know. And I used to believe that. Like, I genuinely used to believe that. I told myself that as a GM. But I tested it, and the way you can test it is quite simply is you roll the dice in the open. And when you roll the dice in the open, the entire behavior of your game table changes. Like, if you say, if you've got the character down to let's say he's down to 5 hit points, and the goblin is going to roll d6 for damage, and you're like, oh, let me roll to see if the goblin kills you, and you roll the die behind the GM screen, the players will kind of look at you, and then you're like, oh, he did 4. You're alive with 1 hit point, Bob. And you think to yourself, I'm such a good GM. I fudged that. And they didn't know, but they knew. And you can test this yourself by, instead of rolling it behind the screen, you roll it right in front of them. And you will watch your players rise up in their seats to look at that die roll. They will, the tension manifests. I've empirically validated this with group after group. And so what I realized is that when the GMs think that they're fooling their players, they're not. Maybe you fool some of the players some of the time for a little bit of time, but ultimately they're not fooled. And the thing is, once they realize you're fudging, it changes the nature of the game. And I know for me, like, as soon as I realize my GM is fudging, I lose interest. I'm done. Like, I'll just start doing ridiculous stuff to try and see if he will ever actually enforce the rules of the game against me.
Right. Yeah.
And lots of other players are like that. Some of them are more subtle, some of them are less. And another heuristic I discovered is that you can tell whether or not the challenge level of your game is correct based on whether or not the group is cheering when Bob kills the dragon, or they're disappointed because Bob stole the dragon and they wanted to be the cool kid who killed the dragon. If they're disappointed when their friends do well at the game table, then they think you're a fudger, or they think your game is too easy, right? Because in an actual combat, right, or when there's real risk, they should be celebrating the fact that dragon just got taken out and they didn't get killed. Yeah. So that's another heuristic you can use. And once I had this realization that everything becomes more viscerally, emotionally powerful and real at the table when you take away the fudging, when you give them the agency, like I could go back, right? I had run games a different way for 10 years prior, and then I couldn't go back, and I was like, I've seen the light. So, and that led me to kind of write the book. So, I wrote the book not as someone who my whole life, like at 7 years old, I wasn't like, you must have player agency, guys. Like, at 7 years
Yeah.
old, I was like, I had the GM and NPCs, and I had the fixed story arc, and I
Right.
can't believe you're not following my story, and oh, I'm fudging all the dice. Like, I was like that for a really long time as a GM, and then I realized there was a better way.
Yeah, I had a similar sort of experience. I don't necessarily think what happened back when I was playing in the 90s, like the more story arc. I came up with immediately with the Hickman Revolution,
Yep.
right? Dragonlance came out. I had my second edition game, and I had like its 10-year long campaign where it was beginning, middle, end, like not directly planned out, but I kind of knew where things needed to go, and I just sort of let the players, have fun on this like roller coaster ride, which had some interesting unexpected things happen. But yeah, I've been rolling out in the open for years now, and you're right, there is definitely a shift in tone, and it's been really interesting to watch, because a lot of the guys who were part of that 10-year campaign still have some of these, I'm going to say, bad habits, who are like starting to like sort of see like what is possible
Right.
when you just sort of just let the dice sort of dictate what happens. But going back to like sort of the definition of a meaningful action and outcome, right? I think at the end of the day, like the game master really has the ultimate say of whether or not a role needs to be sort of
Meaningful, yeah.
direct. Yeah. So
Yeah.
well, another question I always ask everybody I have on the channel when they're first on the channel. I like asking this because it kind of gets into the headspace of the person as a game master. I want to know your personal appendix N. What books, music, movie, whatever gets you jazzed to play this game, get involved in this hobby, influences you, gets you excited, keeps you up at night? What is your appendix N, sir?
Well, as it happens, I literally included an appendix N in Acts. So I could certainly say, well, consult page 445 of the Judge's Journal. So in terms of books, I really like often my taste can definitely run a little grimdark or noble dark at times. Certainly, I love J.R.R. Tolkien. I love Robert E. Howard. I really liked Joe Abercrombie's First Law series, Poul Anderson's Broken Sword, R. Scott Baker's Prince of Nothing, but not the sequel, just the Prince of Nothing series, the not the follow-on trash. Let's see. I like the Black Company. David Gemmel's books were really good. Steve Erickson's Malazan Book of the Fallen. George R. Martin, particularly the early books. Ursula Le Guin is a big favorite of mine, but only the first two books, Wizard of Earthsea and Tomb of Zadawan. Yeah, I would say that's like from probably a reading point of view, those are probably the top ones. A lot of nonfiction, tons of nonfiction. And then, in terms of movies, I have a huge soft spot for all of the 80s fantasy flicks, so like Conan the Barbarian, Beastmaster. And then I also really like 300. It's one of my favorite movies of all
That's a
time.
great movie. I love that movie.
Yeah. The Rome TV show and also Spartacus TV show were huge favorites of mine.
Spartacus. Yeah, I was a big fan of that one
I
too.
thought Rome was so good, and I didn't realize it ended so abruptly when I was watching it. At the end of it. I was like, what?
It was supposed to do another season and they cut it. So.
Oh, I heard.
Oh, is that what it was? Oh.
Like to the ground.
Yeah.
Anyway, how much is books? How much is movies? What's the balance, I think?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I would say like my influence is probably like, call it like 50% books, 30% movies, 20% video games.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always been an exceptionally avid reader. And reading tends to be my first go-to, like that's what's canon. But I love me some movies too.
You said video games. Any particular video game that you would say is kind of influential and how you approach the hobby and the kind of the way you run your games at your table?
Oh yeah, sure. So well, all of my favorite video games outside of the RPG space specifically are what I call two-tier video games. So like in XCOM, you control the XCOM squad, but you also are the head of XCOM as the organization, and you build the bases and you control the research and development. So you can think of Axe as fantasy XCOM, right? You've got the rules for the adventuring party that goes into the dungeon, and then you've got all the rules for deploying adventuring parties in sort of the context of this total war. Likewise, like Master of Orion 2 is one of my favorite video games, where you've got the tactical battles between the star fleets, and then you've also got the grand strategy 4X game. Total War series does the same thing with the 2 tiers, etc. So 2-tier games is hugely influential on me, and that's why Axe is a 2-tier game.
Interesting.
Within the video game RPG space, Morrowind, Oblivion were my biggest influences. I'm a big Elder Scrolls fan. Less so nowadays, but certainly back then.
We have a question from the chat. Do you like Carl Edward Wagner, like Kane series?
So I cannot say that I have read him. So he's not on my appendix N because I didn't read him.
All right, and we have a super chat from DM Cloaker. Hey, what's up, Brian? $5. Thank you, sir. Any potential future where a D&D Beyond caliber digital tool set for Axe is feasible? Accessibility plus ease of reference equals game changer, methinks.
I would love that. I've got a couple guys in the community that are looking into what might be able to be done. With the rise of AI coding, it seems more plausible that a small team might be able to tackle it in a way that wasn't plausible, even a couple years ago. Like, I've been astounded at some of the things I've been able to do using Claude Code that are well beyond my personal capabilities as a programmer, but are within my capabilities of a sort of product manager of vibe coding AI assistants. So that might be possible. I agree with you. I think what I have seen is that people's personal tolerance for crunch manually has gone down. So like when I was a kid, I used to love Car Wars, and I would just build Car Wars cars in my notebook by hand with a calculator, right? Like I just did that, or I would run Traveler economic simulations in my notebook on graph paper. And, nowadays a game like Lancer, where it's much less complex than Car Wars, but, people want to have, they want to have the digital tool to design their mechs, right? And it feels like to me that what we're kind of happening in the space is we're having a divergence where there's very low complexity games that are primarily narrative driven, designed to be played in person, or, party type games, storytelling games, like, oh, the game mechanic is you pull a Jenga tile, right? And then you still have the high crunch games, but there's an expectation if you're going to go high crunch, you got to have digital tools to make the crunch easy for people, right? And so on Ascendant, one of the very first things I did invested in a character creator tool that a guy from our community built for me, and he did a fantastic job, and that's what we use and makes living Ascendant possible. Like, that would not have been possible without his character creator tool, because now we just have an objective method. Everybody creates their character. Here it is on the tool. We can all see how it was built. There's no argument about it. It followed the rules. We can all see it. Bada boom, bada bing. I don't have to worry that your notebook has correct math. So yes, I would love that. Whether it will happen, I don't know. It's, the struggle is real of being an independent RPG designer.
Yeah.
And unfortunately I'm a single income household. My wife isn't able to work. And so, just sometimes, I have to do some caregiving sometimes. And it's just, I don't necessarily get everything done I want to get done.
Well, you're one person. There's only so many hours in the day. So I need to confess before this show. I have another question as far as your appendix N goes, but I need to confess, just so you know, that although I play a lot of different games, I am running an easy D6 game right now. highly narrative.
Yeah.
But it's not like I don't have a story the characters are following. There's just bad guys doing things, and we'll see if the players care to intercede. Um, so I'm not. I appreciate. I think the simulation games are for a much deeper, much longer experience. And your story games, you run 4 to 12 sessions.
Yeah.
Beginning, middle,
I mean,
end, and then you back out.
I
Uh,
ran this wonderful story game called 316 Carnage Amongst the Stars. And it was a buddy of mine was having a birthday party. Everyone who was coming was a tabletop gamer. And he said, we're going to like, he's a wealthy guy from the video game industry. We're going to like his lake house. And so we're just gonna be in the lake house all weekend. He was like, I want a game we can just play all weekend, drop in, drop out. And I'm like, I have it. And so we just ran this story game about being space marines fighting in this, brutal galaxy. And it was great. They had a blast.
and
Super fun.
sometimes it's a really good palate cleanser.
Yep.
You get out of something kind of deep. So I don't want anybody to think we're here to shit on
Oh.
I don't even know what a story game is. Chubby says a story game is a game where the players have some sort of control over the game world.
Yes, that's right.
And if that's the case, I don't think I play story games. But I do play. I will play a rules light system that lends itself towards a narrative.
Yeah.
Like the NPCs kind of become the room or the clue or whatever.
Right.
But not very often. It's hard.
Yeah. Story game I define as a game where the players have authorial control over the game world. Right.
Yeah. Great. Then I'm not a dirty story gamer.
So like as an example, in 316, when if your character is losing a fight, you can what you can do is you can all of a sudden stop the gameplay to have a flashback. And then you then describe a flashback of a prior event in the game world where this exact problem came up and you solved it. And then you then return to the gameplay. And then because you've had this flashback, you can then win the battle.
Where they kind of have the same, where you can talk about, oh, well, we planned that 3 weeks ago when I came,
right.
Sort of the heist. But that is a heist movie trope. That is sort
of. It is.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what that to me is where story games can do best, is when they're tightly emulating a genre and they nail the tropes with fun mechanics.
Yeah. Yep. So, Rook, I don't mean to keep going back and forth, but it's the first time you're here. I've been thinking of questions all day. None of them line up. So we're just going to scatter shot some more. Your appendix in, you have a comic book game. You've put out a couple comics now. What comics do you like? I'm a comic
guy.
Yeah. Gary is a comic guy.
Yeah, great question. So in terms of the direct inspiration for how I write comics, it is 100% Frank Miller in his Dark Knight, Batman Begins and Dark Knight Returns era.
Nice.
If you read those books, you will see it like the use of the captions to give the characters inner thoughts, which are sort of juxtaposed and sometimes opposite to what's happening in the world. Sort of the narration of the events, the cutouts to story being told with epistolary action of like TV news reporters and things like that. I have actually this really beautiful leather-bound volume of Dark Knight Returns.
So do I.
Yeah, right. Okay, it was famous edition, right?
Yeah.
I have that is my Bible of. I consider that to be the greatest graphic novel ever written, and so that is the approach I took. Obviously, I'm not Frank Miller, but I'm an epigony of Frank Miller.
That period for Frank Miller was so he just changed everything. And unfortunately, we've spent the last 30 years now reading a bunch of guys not as good as Frank Miller trying to do Frank Miller, and it just it's gross. Anyway.
Yeah. Now what I would say then, I'm not actually Frank Miller. And this is a friend of mine said this to me. I thought this was very, very funny. I was like, you're totally right. So he said, because he was reading Ascendant, and he was like, I hadn't realized kind of how funny you are, Alex. Like your comic books, your graphic novel, the world's actually very funny. There's a lot of like humor. Like I can tell you love the stories. You take the stories seriously. There's a lot of mega violence and drama and consequences, but they're really funny. And he said, I think you're actually Quentin Tarantino. Because you think about Quentin Tarantino, what he does is he loved 70s exploitation films. And so he does all his movies are basically like remakes of these 70s exploitation films. And he takes it really seriously, but they're also really funny on a certain level. Like Pulp Fiction is actually very funny when you watch it,
Yeah.
etc. And I was like, oh, that's exactly what it is. That's what it is. So I'm the Quentin Tarantino to doing Frank Miller of comic books.
That makes a lot of sense because sometimes I've played a lot of superhero games. I would say my favorite game as a kid wasn't even Dungeons and Dragons. It was a toss up between Marvel superheroes and Star Wars D6.
Both great games.
I just love the over the top action. I'm still that way.
Yeah.
I just love that stuff. But superhero games are funny because you punch somebody in the face and you read the chart and it's like, oh, you just knocked him 300 yards.
Yep.
And you can't help but laugh and
Yep.
think. And in the modern age, you read things like Invincible through
Yeah.
I love comics. Comic role-playing games are a hard nut to crack. They are, because I think everybody has a different impression. There's so many different styles of comics. I think people want different things from their games. So.
Yeah.
Got a real quick super chat because he's Chubby's going to bed. $2. Thanks, man. Great show.
Hi, Chubby.
Start 30 minutes earlier. Damn it, Chubby.
Yeah.
We changed the time once for you, Chubby.
Yeah, we already did it once.
Second watch, man. Yeah, so I would say beyond Frank Miller, aesthetically, I really loved like the Bad Girls comics of the Image Comics era. You definitely can see that vibe, like in the character Stiletto, Aurora, like that is very, very evident. We're bringing sexy back. All the girls are hot. All the heroes are manly, masculine.
Remember Gen 13? What was who was that? Love that book, dude. And and honestly, I don't know what the story was, but
so that's like aesthetically, it's kind of that Image comic books. Jade Warriors was one of my favorites from that era. We kind of brought that style back. And then in terms of the actual like personal collection, my biggest personal comic book collection is Green Lantern, and I have hundreds and hundreds of Green Lantern comics from the Green Lantern Hal Jordan era, then Green Lantern with Green Arrow, and then all the way through Green Lantern with John Stewart, Green Lantern with Guy Gardner, and then the return of Hal Jordan.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
20 years of Green Lantern.
That's a 2-tier comic. That makes a lot of sense. It fits in with your video games. You've got the large organization.
Yeah.
And then you've got your solo stories.
Yep.
Who's your favorite Lantern?
Hal Jordan. Yeah. I'm a traditionalist.
He's got to be, right? Yeah. It's got to be Hal. I like the others.
Yeah.
I don't know about Kyle.
Yeah.
Anyway, I like Hal the best, but I do enjoy John Stewart, and Guy Gardner is just great to have around. So all right, cool, man. You're a real comics guy. You heard that, everybody.
There you go.
Yeah, Gary, that was Gary's subtle interrogation.
All right, so we're gonna talk about Green Lantern. So I started collecting at the era, and I'm like this angst-ridden teenager, right, at the time, and it's the era when sort of Hal Jordan, like Carol Ferris is like upset at him because he's so busy being Hal Jordan, or so busy being Green Lantern. And so he gives up being a Green Lantern to get with Carol Ferris. And so he's going to be her devoted husband now, gives up the ring, and John Stewart takes the ring. And then Carol Ferris turns into Star Sapphire and turns evil and like leaves the planet. And I'm just like, there's a lesson here as a young man that I have learned. You should never give up the ring of power for some bitch. Like, oh my God, Hal, what have you done?
That was, man, I haven't really read DC since probably, I want to say it was Darkest Night. I don't know if you remember. It was
that the zombie one?
Yeah. And I remember at the time loving it, but I went back and tried to read it again. It was kind of like, oh, you might have turned the lanterns into My Little Pony.
Yeah.
With all the different colored
all the
rings
different colors and everything.
That
was after my era.
Yeah. It was fun while it was happening, but after it was over, it was like, oh, they're not putting this back in the bottle. They're just gonna. Oh, great.
We got a comment from Wib Stobson. Alex, one of my favorite rules in Acts 2 is reserve XP fund in the revised rule book. I think that works really well for a campaign that has irregular attendance. I'll tell you, I ran a 3-year Lamentations of the Flame Princess campaign using Temple of Elemental Evil as sort of like a backdrop, and like Village of Hamlet and all that. And I incorporated that because Lamentations has got, you're going to have a high body count with that game, and I incorporated that, and that kind of like helped ease the blow. So that I think that's one of the more innovative things I think I've seen coming from Axe, that you can import into any game. And especially if you have players like I do in my home crew who are not used to dying, because they're used to the dice fudging. I think it's a nice I don't know, yeah, soften the blow, I guess. But what was that something that like your solution to players complaining, just like, oh, we're dying too much?
It was partly that, but also it was a frustration with overcautious players. And here's what I mean by that. If you think about like a Viking who genuinely believes that if he dies in battle, he's going to go to Valhalla, his attitude towards risking his life is going to be very different than the attitude of Alex, who thinks if he dies in battle, people will make fun of him on Twitter. And right, it's a different mentality. Or likewise, like a samurai who believes if he dies gloriously for his lord, he will be reincarnated, versus, if he dies cowardly, he'll be reincarnated as a grasshopper or something, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Or the Fields of Elysium, if you go Greek myth. And the problem is the way traditional RPGs are set up, like, yeah, you can be restored from life and limb or whatever, raise the dead, but there's no afterlife reward for your character. No matter how gloriously you lived or what crazy things you did in the game world, like, oh, your character died, that's the end for you. And so therefore it's very materialist, and it makes the players act like materialists rather than like people who believe that there's an afterlife that rewards glory. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to have game mechanics that allowed you to play a character who was genuinely not concerned about whether he lived or died, as long as he died gloriously. So that was the reserve XP rules and the heroic funeral rules. And so when I play Axe, I blow so much money just doing ridiculous things to get reserve XP. I'm erecting statues and, feast halls and, pimping out and just ridiculousness. And then, I just die glorious. I've never survived an Axe campaign, but I always have a ton of fun, having the best deaths possible.
I was just going to say, another thing that I noticed, I actually wanted to ask you about. This is more in the judge's journal, because I've never seen anything like it, and that's the abstraction of like the dungeons, abstract dungeons. What was the, I guess, motivation? What was the, what got you going in that?
So that developed in Axioms, and I was approached by this really talented freelancer, and he goes by the handle of Rixa Meraki, Matt Jarmack. And he approached me and he was like, I'm kind of a mathematician, skilled dude. And I was playing around. I think I could actually create like an abstract system to where you could actually be the wizard and just send adventurers out on dungeons and abstractly find out what happens. And I was like, well, that would be hugely valuable. He's like, yeah, you've got the math with such rigor, I think it could all work out. I was like, well, let's do it. And so he pulled that together, and it became hugely popular in Axioms. And so then we incorporated it into Axe 2. And so that didn't come from me, that came from him. But it was one of those cases where it's like, well, I listened to the community, and this rose out of the community. And it filled an important niche, because there is the case where you get to that point where you're the king, you're the Dark Lord, you want to send your minions out to do your bidding, but you don't really want to spend the next 6 hours role playing your minions doing your bidding. You just kind of want your minions to report back and let you know what happened. And this is the now your minions can report back and let you know what happened mechanic. So.
Yeah, I actually saw Black Lodge Games had talked a little bit about this a while back. It has other uses too, where like it's your end of the session, you're traveling back to your home base and you stumble upon like a low level dungeon, so you could just abstract it. I thought that was a really clever way of using that rule set too. So I didn't know that was one of those community inspired things. So so anyway, go ahead, Gary, you had something.
I was just settling in, man. What are you talking about? No, I actually, sorry, all my questions are so scattershot. I really should have made some notes, but typically we sit around and try to get other creators drunk with us.
If I had known, I would have had drinks.
Well, here's the thing. One of the reasons I think this is so scattershot is because it's like, oh, he's here now. Ask him every question you can think of. Next time, if you come around, it'll be a lot more casual. But I'm curious about some really simple things you did for Axe character creation, the roll 5d6,
Oh
40,
yeah.
3d6. Where did that come from?
Oh yeah. Okay. So this
I
is
love that.
I
Love
have
that.
very strong opinions on that mechanic. So one of the things that I stumbled upon when using straight 3d6 to generate characters is that you get characters who are really interesting and effective, but they're not necessarily the character you would make if you min-maxed from the get-go. So like when we played 3.5 and you had like the fixed set of stats everybody gets 116, 114, 13, 12, 10, 8. Like it was down to a science. You went onto the forums and people had mathematically calculated the optimal stat array for every character class, every combination of character class. And God forbid, if you played a fighter with intelligence 16, you got laughed off the table.
Right.
Okay. But the problem is, of course, as we know in real life, that there are sometimes fighters with intelligence 18. Alexander the Great was a really brilliant man. Napoleon was a really brilliant man. And their character class wasn't mage, right? Or likewise, like, sometimes you have a wizard who's really charismatic, or you have a thief who's got a really high constitution or whatnot. So 3 die 6 enables you to have that. But the problem with straight 3 die 6 is that you often don't have the stats for the character you want, or your overall stats are so terrible that your character's not playable, or one guy at the table, ends up way more powerful than everyone else and has all this downside. So the solution to that people had kept coming back to is like, all right, well, generate a bunch of characters and pick the one you like the best. Or roll lots of dice, drop the lowest ones, keep the best stats. And what that tended to do, though, is it created stat inflation. Everyone became better at everything across the board, which then created its own problems. So I said, what I need is a system that can guarantee that with one set of die rolls, you can have a playable character that will let you be able to pick what niche you want to be in, but at the same time can still create the uncertainty of the really intelligent fighter or the really charismatic mage or whatever. And so I looked at the classes and I said, by and large, for any given character class in the game, you need to be at least average or above in 3 stats, and you have 1 stat that you kind of need to be pretty good at, or you probably shouldn't be doing that for your day job. And then the other stats, you could or could not be good at them. It's optional. And so I was like, all right, so we're going to split it. We're going to have a 5 die 6 that you can pick for 1 stat, a 4 die 6 for 2 stats with minimums of 9 and 13 respectively. And the others, you're on your own, Bob. And so it worked out really well because you can, we're literally worst case, you can be a fighter with strength 13, con 9, dex 9, and then you're just stupid, unwise, and uncharismatic. But that is still a playable fighter. You can still play that fighter, and he's a fun guy, and you're gonna, you'll go out and have a good time. But you might also end up with a fighter who's got strength 13, dex 9, con 9, int 18, and that's also a really fun, interesting fighter. Right? Or you could change your mind and decide to be a mage or whatever. But I'm really happy with how that system worked. I use it now in all my campaigns.
I'm actually whether I'm playing your game or any BX, whatever it is, I think that is gonna be what I do going forward. Matt really, he's like this OSR purist. He loves 3D.
I'm not a purist. I just
a little bit more than I am.
Maybe a little bit.
More than I am. And he's into that thing where he loves rolling 3D6 and getting this character that's just horrible.
Right.
Like, I'm gonna play him. And there are people who enjoy that. But I think most people, they want to play the character they want. They want to try this character. If I joined an Axe game tomorrow and didn't get to try out, what is it, the Venture class?
Right.
I'd kind of be disappointed. I think that's a really interesting class. I tried to make it for OSC. Remember when I was?
Yeah, I remember that.
It over. So I really like that, and I appreciate it. And then you did the other thing, and I don't know where this is from, but you re-roll all of your hit dice when you level up. I think that's a great rule as well. Yeah. So
yeah. So that was not my innovation. Other folks in the Axe community started doing that after Axe 1 came out, and I heard them talking about it. And I said, oh, that seems really interesting. Let me try that out. And when I tried it, I really, really liked it because it keeps the randomness of hit points per level, but it really takes the sting away because you know that if you get a bad roll, you're going to make up for it
Right.
in the
If you
future.
can make it to level 2, it might all be better.
Yeah, exactly.
You're a one hit
Exactly.
point magic user. What are some other things? Oh God, there's so many. You have a mapping proficiency.
Yep.
There's the mapping proficiency, and I know we only have 15 minutes, and then there's the hasty action, like the 10-minute turn action, and then the
Yep.
round action. Go on, just tell me about it.
Oh yeah. Okay. So sure. So the
it's-
so D&D had the 10-minute turn, and
Right.
originally speaking, it was you want to open a lock, it takes 10 minutes. You want to check for traps, it takes 10 minutes, and it created this very stately turn-based exploration, which I think was really good and valuable, and it gives a sense of presence to the exploration part of the game that 3.5 and 4 lost, right? Like,
Yeah.
you got the 6-minute dungeon, right?
Mhm.
So, but of course, it is a known fact that men who are really good lock picks can pick locks much faster than 10 minutes. People can search a room much faster than 10 minutes if they know what they're doing. So I was like, okay. And then I also noted that the percentage chance of thieves succeeding were very low in our AD&D and BX, and people really complained about it. And they're like, oh, these guys aren't powerful enough, and it sucks. I spend 10 minutes just to fail. So then I came up with this idea. It's like, what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to keep the standard percentage chances. It's going to be the same rough probabilities, but those are going to be the probabilities if you do it hastily, if you try and get it done fast. And only thieves and proficient characters can try and get it done fast. And then if you want to do it methodically, then anyone can try. If you're not proficient, you have a very small chance to succeed, about the chance of a first level thief doing it hastily. But the thieves now get a bonus to doing it hastily. And also, if you do it doing it methodically, and if you do it methodically, you can try again if you fail. You can try again if you fail. And it made a huge difference for the gameplay of Thieves. And the other key insight was that a fundamental error had been made early on in the game when they said that elves and dwarves can see in the dark, humans can't, and thieves can't see in the dark. But thieves are supposed to hide in shadows. But thieves are supposed to scout ahead. And I'm like, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I'm like, all right, so basically what we're saying is that elves and dwarves get to be the Americans in the Gulf War, and they get thermal imaging. And the thieves are like the Iraqis trying to approach the tanks on 43 Easting, and they're getting killed from 3,000 meters because they don't have night vision. And I'm like, well, no wonder everybody thinks it sucks to be a human thief. Yeah, it would really suck if, everybody else on the planet had thermal dark vision and you don't, and your power is hide and sneak. So, so I ditched, I shortened the range of infravision for the monsters, changed how it worked, and then I gave the thieves shadowy senses, so they're like Daredevil in the dark. And then they have the hasty methodical, and I'm really proud of it. I think Acts 2 did for thieves what Acts 1 did for fighters, which is it made them feel balanced and fun, right up to par with wizards, and you don't feel like you're outclassed anymore.
Well, and I have to say that it's those little things up front that made me care enough to keep read. We read so many games, they're kind of almost the same, and there's little differences, and you feel like these little differences are put in there for taste,
Right.
For preference,
Right.
as opposed to purpose.
Right.
And that's why I brought up the mapping proficiency, because mapping, I just played my first game with mapping. I had, even as a kid, I never used Mapper. That was whatever. And after using that and then reading how you handle that, and if you wouldn't mind describing in just a second, but reading how you handle that, it's like, this is perfect. Like it's a perfect middle ground. So if you could explain that and then just tell people kind of where that came from, because I think that's
Sure. Well, I grew up with mapping. It was traditional in when we played first edition and basic D&D as kids. But it was always a big problem because the maps were often wrong because the GM is trying to narrate what you can't see. He's like, well, you're in a 30 by 20 room, but it's sort of egg shaped, and it's like he's trying to narrate it. And then it could become exhausting to go into too much detail. And so the maps were often wrong, but then, it became this adversarial relationship sometimes there. And then later in 3.5, people were using battle maps. And so the GM would just draw the battle map. And so then kind of mapping fell out of favor. And then there's expectation. Interesting enough, happening kind of simultaneously with video games went to doing the mapping for you, whereas like early video games didn't do the mapping for you. So I myself am actually a much better verbal and mathematical thinker than I am a visual spatial thinker. So I always had a tough time whenever I was assigned to be the mapper of translating the GM's words into a map. And so I thought, okay, like, despite my best efforts, sometimes I would just misunderstand. I'm like, I really wish the GM would just correct me, because if I was actually in the room, it would be obvious to me that I've drawn the shape incorrectly, but somehow this isn't happening. So my idea of the mapping proficiency was essentially like, if you've got the mapping proficiency, then you can go ahead and draw the map, and the GM is going to kind of like take a look at the map, and he's going to give you the heads up if you've completely foobarred on the map.
Mm.
And if you don't have the mapping proficiency, then you're basically me in real life, and you don't know what you're doing, and the GM is not going to help you out. But you can still map, good luck, make a map, do the best you can.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, it played really well. One of the things I do in my game designs is I have discovered, as I over the years, I've discovered I'm incompetent at a lot of things that adventurers need to be good at. So I know for a fact that there's a proficiency throw involved because I failed a proficiency throw, right? So like, if you put me in a room and you're like, there are car keys in this room, find them. I will be like, there are no car keys in this room, right? Like, I just won't find them. Whereas my wife will walk in and be like, oh yeah, they're on top of the fridge behind the vase. I'm like, how
Yeah.
did you do that, right?
Yeah.
And she has searching proficiency and I do not. All right. And so like, and it's also why I abandoned the kind of Mother May I style play of BX and AD&D, where the player just describes what he does and the character automatically does it. I talk about this a little bit on my blog and in the Judge's Journal, because I'm like, have you ever tried building furniture from an IKEA catalog? I can read an IKEA catalog to you and tell you, like, these are the instructions. Use the jerry wrench to insert the glimaglob into the blue blob and put, but I can't actually do it. It takes me 8 hours to do a 30-minute piece of furniture. And so I'm like, this is clearly proficiency, and there should be a skill check involved.
Really, the
Yeah.
advice putting together IKEA furniture is you will shave your time if you let yourself become very angry and curse. Like all of your kids have to leave the house for ice cream or something.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
will shave off about 7 minutes.
That's good to know. It's good
Yep.
to know. Yeah.
We got a super chat from Disco, $5. Thank you, sir. And this actually dovetails into something I wanted to comment on as well. You did a great job finding issues that I didn't even know existed at the table and provide very elegant
Oh,
ways
thank
to
you.
solve them. Acts 2 is a masterpiece. So like I said, I started this campaign with the Rule Cyclopedia and kind of like embrace sort of Matthew Tapp's Barrows and Borderlands, like anything goes. If you guys find something, we're going to incorporate it. It's going to be a game of games kind of thing. But the core is the Rule Cyclopedia. And of course, it's got its skills section, which frankly I think are horribly written. And there are like this attempts at like a mapping proficiency in that book, or I think they call it caving or something like that. But anyway, and the way my take is that it kind of supersedes some of the more fundamental rules of that game and end up breaking the game. But they're trying to approach, like you pointed out, to address certain issues from a player perspective. And I think what Gary's mentioned purpose. I think what you've done with a lot of these rules, especially like your skill section in Acts, and I'm like old school OSR. I'm not a big fan of skills, but I recognize there's a tension there. You may need them, but what you've done with the skills section is sort of address what's needed in game, but also that player knowledge that may or may not be there. Like, obviously, I don't want my players to say, I spent 6 months learning armory, so my character is now an armorer. Obviously, I don't want that, but I also want to have that creative back and forth to problem solve.
Yeah.
And there's this balance that you actually, I think, achieve with how you approach skills in Acts that I appreciate. And I think what captures that is how you do mapping. It's like, if you pass the test, you show your map to the DM. The DM's like, you screwed up here.
Right.
And there you go. Problem solved. No one's frustrated. The map's done, and if you did fail the test, well, then the map's wrong.
Yeah. And I do the same thing with knowledge proficiencies as well, right? Like, you're welcome to deduce that you think that this mold that's colored yellow is yellow mold, and you can act accordingly, but you don't know for sure unless you've made your, knowledge proficiency throw. And then you're like, no, I have conclusively, as a naturalist in the game world, identified that this is, toxoplasmosis mold, blah, blah, blah. Right. Like, yeah.
So we have 3 minutes left.
Uh-oh.
I would, you're probably not going to be able to answer this in 3 minutes.
All right, I'll try.
As we wrap up this evening, can you please explain to the audience what it is about a long-term campaign with the same players working together, rules as written, no fudging dice, things are going to be hard. Can you please explain the value of a game like that as compared to maybe something lighter that lasts for 6 weeks?
Sure. It is my belief that the joy, the pleasure of playing the game increases with the cumulative investment that you make into the character and into the game world. Tolkien talks about secondary creation, right? And it is clear that over time, Middle-earth becomes more important to Tolkien as he fleshes it out, and more important to his family, more important to his readers, because it becomes more real with time. And I think the same is true of the tabletop game that you play with your friends over many years. Like, you look at the way Rick Stump talks about his multi-decade campaign, right? Like, this clearly has had a meaningful impact on him and his family and his friends for many, many, many years. And so the relationship that the player has with the events happening at the table then becomes more profound than the relationship you have in a one-off at a tournament, or even in a 6-week game that it's going to end soon rather than later. It's the difference between the enjoyment you get from a movie and the enjoyment you get from reading the Aubrey Maturin series of 20 books about Jack Aubrey, right? It's a difference. There's just a different level of investment that is made in the imaginative world. And I think it's a tragedy that so few people get to play long-term campaigns. I genuinely feel like they're missing out in something vital. Which doesn't mean you can't have a blast in a short campaign. It's just a different experience, right? It's a different experience. The advantage of the shorter campaign is you're more free to take more risks. You're more free to experiment. You're more free to try different things. You can palate cleanse in ways that you wouldn't. Like, just like you're like, it's a 90-minute movie. It's not the genre I'd normally watch. Let's give it a try. Versus like, I'm just not watching 8 seasons of Italian crime drama. It's just not my genre, right? Same thing. So I think there's room for both. But right now, the industry is really heavily serving the short-term campaign and the one-off much more than it's serving the long-term campaign. There are very few games that are oriented towards long-term campaigns.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think it's been I personal experience with my in-person gaming crew. I know they want, because some of them were in during that 10-year game, they were there. I know they want that experience again, but they're kind of like stuck in this like more narrative mindset where there's going to be like this sort of instant gratification. They're the hero, they got this thing. In fact, I remember about what it was March of last year. I'm like showing them Gods of the Forbidden North and be like explaining one-to-one time. And I was like, guys, you got to trust me. In a year's time, this is going to be the most coolest thing that you've ever done. Just trust me. And like Gary and our viewers have been hearing me talk about it. They've been getting it slowly. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth, but they're getting it. So I agree with you 100% there. There is, my friends look back to the 90s. They sometimes refer to that campaign as the campaign, and a lot of friendships were forged. You know what I mean? Like they in some sense, like we really did sort of save each other from the monster, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same with my friends. We talk about events that occurred back then as if they had happened. They were real in some powerful way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, guys, I'm just thanks for being here. It's 11:31. I don't want to keep you past your time. I appreciate this very much. No, Matt does too. When we were putting together our first list of guests, we were so funny. I don't think we realized how accessible and how nice most people were.
Oh yeah.
So when we were putting a guest list together, I was like, Do you think Macris would do it?
And I
Oh,
was like, I don't know, man. It's got such a small channel.
We
But
should
then
work up to him.
yeah,
oh,
and then you know I met you at Arnicon, and I was just like, I almost had my hat in my hand. I was like, I got this small channel.
oh,
But we do really appreciate it because our Arbiter of the Worlds in particular, I can't stress this book enough. Notwithstanding the games, if you take game mastery seriously, you got to read this book. It's got to be.
If you take
It's been a revelation. It's
yeah,
been a revelation for me.
if you just do, you don't even have to take it that seriously. I've always had this thing where I don't want my games to stress me out. I try not to get that.
right.
They're games. I've got a real life. If you were just interested in being a better game master and running just better games altogether, Arbiter of Worlds or the Judge's Journal, there's not really. I don't think you can make a better investment. Speaking of which, I know I'm not one of your whales, but I do think I'm one of your better monetary customers because I typically don't buy physical product. So I have to buy the PDF first. So that's however much. And then I
Right.
talk myself into buying the physical.
Yeah,
Bro, you're hitting me every which way.
many
here,
such
man.
cases. Many such cases.
So thank you very much, man. We're really
Thank you
glad
for
to
having me on, guys. It's been a real pleasure, and I'm happy to come on anytime. So
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, guys, chat. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for the questions. You guys have been great. There was some great conversations I saw in the chat. But as we all know, at this time, our watch is ended. So we'll see you guys next week.